If you have a goal of making a big impact, and something tells me if you listen to this podcast, I'm probably talking about you, then you are not going to be able to do it alone. But how do you know when you're ready to outsource things or hire a team? I am so in this exact season right now as we speak. So today I'm going to break down just a few of the ways I've changed my own mindset around this, around outsourcing and hiring, and how I knew I was ready to take that next step and build a team. So someone asked me this question the other day, and we were talking about our goals for our businesses in 2020, because at the time of this recording, it's like right around the corner. And she asked what the vision or what my goals were for Powerhouse Women for 2020. And the first thing out of my mouth and the first thing on my mind was to build a team. And had you talked to me a year ago, that would have been the furthest thing from my mind. I remember just feeling so stretched, but yet so not ready to take on the responsibility of having a team, take on the responsibility of hiring or even outsourcing simple tasks. And it's funny, I was listening to a podcast earlier today, and the person being interviewed was Barbara Corcoran, who, Shark Tank, she's like this badass entrepreneur. And she was talking about how she sees this trend, and it really made me think about how true this has been for my own life, that it's much harder for women to make that first hire. And what she said about it was that we have this way of feeling guilty about outsourcing, even if it's like, think about maybe a mom having a nanny come in to do some help. Or I remember feeling that way even the first time I hired someone to come and help me clean my house, because here I was, I work from home, and I felt so guilty having someone else clean around me when I was clearly there, even though I was working and I was, producing and I was, doing something that is making a positive impact in another way. So I don't know if you've ever felt like that. I'm really growing through this right now as we speak. And in the last few weeks, I have really started to change my mindset around it and think bigger. My goal literally is to outsource like a ninja this next year. And, I've noticed that the more I start to outsource things, and I've done a better job over the last 6 months, the faster our brand and our community has really grown. So I'm taking it to a whole new level in 2020, including hiring our very first full-time team member, which that'll be coming soon, and just starting to really look at how I can leverage the gifts and the skills of other people to free up my time to focus on the things that I'm really good at. So if you felt the same way too, I'm right there with you. So we can get through this together. And I bet when we look back a year from now, we will say to each other, I wish I would have started to do that sooner. I wish I would have started outsourcing and hiring other people to do things that I'm not great at or that I don't have the time for. I wish I would have done that sooner. I'm already feeling that way, and I haven't fully stepped into outsourcing and hiring. But what I noticed was that it really had to change, or it had to start with changing my mindset around the idea of outsourcing. And so I'm just going to share a couple of the things that have been going through my mind and a couple of the mindset changes that I've made. Maybe they'll help you too. And then I'm going to share just a couple of tips on even the difference between outsourcing versus hiring an actual team member, and get you thinking about how, even if you don't feel like you're ready financially, like maybe you don't have a big budget to hire a team member full or part-time, there's actually a lot of ways you can get very creative with outsourcing or trading or bartering, whatever you need to do in order to free up some more of your time. And I think it all does start with changing our mindset around this, because if you're listening and this is kind of making you squirm, it's making you uncomfortable, or you felt stretched by the thought that, okay, I do want some help. I know that I'm maxed at my capacity to do any more than I'm currently doing if I continue to go at this pace. The first thing I had to do was really look at what was preventing me from bringing in help. And for me, I'm just going to get real honest here. One of the biggest things that I had to change about my mindset is the idea that there was no one else who could do things as well as I could. I mean, anyone else? I mean, like literally my husband can tell you it's like perfectionist type A to the 10th degree. I am that person that rearranges the dishes in the dishwasher after someone else has already put them in there because there's a certain way that I do it. This is like so embarrassing. But that is a huge roadblock to me scaling this business and scaling the impact that we could be making, is thinking that no one else can do things as well as I can. There is this meme the other day. I just like died laughing because nothing has ever described my life so accurately. It was like just text, and it said me saying, I could really use some help around here. And then also me, no, not like that. Never mind, I'll do it. And that is kind of like how I've operated, and it's worked pretty well for me up until this point. But there are certain things that it just doesn't make sense for me to be doing in the business anymore if I could teach someone else how to do them. And part of that was letting go of the thought that things have to be perfect up to my exact way of doing them, or even entertaining the fact that there's probably people who love doing things that I don't love and could do them better. So those of you fellow perfectionist type A people, I know this is hard to even consider, but there could be people that are actually better than we are at doing certain things. So I really had to challenge my mindset there. But the second place I had to challenge my mindset, and this was the biggest one, is I would always look at where I currently am, or the amount of like the budget that I currently have to hire some help. And I always felt so trapped because I couldn't see my way to having the extra funds to hire someone and create more time for me. But because I didn't have any more time to give, meaning I was so caught up in doing everything, doing all the things in the business, that then I didn't have any more time to go out and produce extra income to then hire people. It was like this vicious circle. And so I had to think about hiring for where I'm going, not hiring for where I am right now. That was such a huge shift for me because I never felt ready to invest money in hiring, but I had to look at the time that money could really buy me. So what else could I be doing to generate more revenue for my business if I weren't spending the time doing X, Y, or Z? So I was almost using this fear or this reason of like not having the money as an excuse to keep playing small, because eventually my capacity was tapped out and I'd created like this perfect environment where I had an excuse not to hire and not to have to break my type A ways. But then I knew that the business was never going to grow beyond what I was currently doing. So those two things, hiring for where I'm going, not where I am right now, and then realizing that, hey, there's going to be people who are actually better at things than I am. I know, shocking. This is very shocking information to me, but changing my mindset around those two things really helped me to start seeing where I could be outsourcing and creating more time for myself to focus on the things that I'm really good at and that drive the business forward. So a couple of tips for getting started, and even just like the breakdown between outsourcing versus hiring. So I think I always looked at creating more time for myself as I've got to hire a virtual assistant or a part-time assistant. But I actually started by delegating certain tasks to contractors. So one thing that I did this year is I hired a company, Creative Label. We love them. They've been on the podcast. I hired them to create social media graphics. I noticed that it took me forever to like even just come up with something to post. I didn't mind writing the copy, but trying to make it look beautiful and, look on brand, that was just taking me a lot of time. So I hired them to start creating graphics for our social media. And then I also hired someone to write email copy. They take my ideas and the things that I've started, but they make it sound like my voice. They make it sound like a cohesive email, and then they upload it and they schedule it. So it still is my content. I'm not completely outsourcing my brand voice, but I'm having someone help me to get that content out there faster. And so I started by just hiring contractors or people that I could hire to do specific tasks versus bringing in an employee or a VA. And that's, I think, where most of us will start. So just a couple of other different places to outsource. I already mentioned like the social media graphics, the emails, this podcast that you're listening to. I don't edit this podcast. I have the most amazing team that edits this podcast because that isn't where my skill set is. So rather than spending a bunch of time doing something that is ultimately going to take a lot of time for me to even learn, I look at it from the standpoint of, okay, by investing in someone else doing that for me, then what can I use that time for that I'm now not using to edit a podcast? What can I be using that to do in order to grow the business? So that's kind of the first place to start looking. And then here is just the way to start looking at your own life or business, because this actually can impact your life too, and looking for things that you can start to outsource as soon as humanly possible, right? This is all about buying back your precious time. So the first place to look is the things that you don't love to do, or you're not great at, or it would take too much time for you to learn. So like I mentioned with like the social media graphics, I've done that before. I notice it's not effortless for me. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of my creative energy. So I looked at it more from the standpoint of, just how much time that could afford me to do other things. So that's a great place to look first and foremost. And then here is probably this is the one piece of information that gave me the most freedom around starting to outsource some of this and not being afraid to invest my hard-earned dollars in outsourcing, is this easy and very simple little formula that someone gave me. I've heard a few people share this. This isn't new radical information, but to actually break down what your desired hourly rate is. Or you could even just start with how much you are currently bringing in as far as business revenue, and either do your goal revenue or where you are right now. But it's a way to actually look at how much your time, an hour of your time, is worth. So just for easy math, here's one way to look at it, and then you can just plug in your numbers. So let's say your goal is to make $100,000 in the next calendar year. And in that year, you want to work 40 hours a week. Let's just call it a typical work week. Maybe you want to work less, then plug in a smaller number. And then let's say you want to work 50 weeks out of the year. So you're going to take 2 weeks off at least, fully just vacation. So for easy math, we'll say your goal is to make $100K working 40 hours a week and then 50 weeks out of the year. If you break that down, that time is worth $50 an hour. Now, let's say you wanted to make $1 million a year. That's closer to $500 an hour. So when someone showed me this formula, they said, okay, now think about it. Let's say making social media graphics or like writing email copy. What if you could hire someone to do that for $20 an hour? Well, if you're saying your time is worth $50 an hour, then it would be a better business move for you to pay someone $20 an hour and for you to go out and find the things that are going to generate that $50 an hour or that $100,000 in revenue for your business. And you could hire people to do anything. I mean, this even goes as far as personal things like cleaning your house, doing your grocery shopping. Now when I actually had this happen this week, I was like, I still battle this mindset of like, oh, it's just less expensive for me to do it myself, or I have the time, why don't I just do it myself? And my husband was like traveling for work, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to clean up the house really quick. I literally spent 30 minutes, and inside my head, a voice said, oh my goodness, this is why you have the most amazing woman who comes and just takes such great care of our home. And I was literally trying to save like $100 by cleaning my own house, which would have taken me like 4 hours that I could have been using to either do something productive or relax, right? So I sent the text, I booked our house cleaner to come the next day, and like I still catch myself trying to cut corners, thinking I'm saving money, but really all that I'm doing is taking energy I could be using to produce something in my business or to just like do a little self-care, and I'm using that energy where I'm technically working for below my hourly rate if I really look at just the simple math of it. And so whenever I'm in that debate and I'm feeling a little bit almost like lack mindset around outsourcing something, I go back to that rate and I do another calculation, because sometimes my goal income for the year will change, or, I'll just like run the numbers and be like, okay, if I say my time is worth, and I don't even know, maybe it's like $200 an hour, then should I hire this person for, $20 an hour to do this one task for me? It's like a very easy yes. So hopefully that helps you too. And my challenge for you this week is just really simple. It's to do an audit of how much you want to make next year, the numbers that you want to be working as far as weeks per year, hours per week, and figure out your hourly wage. And then take a day or maybe even a whole week where you write down from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, everything that you do throughout the day, and look for where there's things that either they just take you a lot of time, or where you could possibly hire out a task that you could pay someone far less than your desired hourly rate. And if you think about it from like the supporting of other people and other small businesses, you can also support another amazing entrepreneur or small business by circulating some of your money back into the system, that you want to participate in. So I think it's a really great exercise for all of us to do, and just consistently be doing those audits to see where we could be buying ourselves more time, and also just scaling and growing the impact that we know that we're here to make. So I really want to hear what you have to say about all of this. I want to hear, if you're willing to share, you can even share your hourly rate if you did the calculation. The place to do that and to plug into the conversation is the Powerhouse Women community on Facebook. You can literally just go to Facebook, type in Powerhouse Women community, ask to join, and then plug into the conversation there. And I'd love to know what you have to say. So I'm curious to hear where are the places you have seen you could definitely take the leap, do some more outsourcing. And I feel like it's also just the best way to live out the motto of Powerhouse Women. I feel like no matter where you are, in your car, on a run, I want you to say this with me, right? We all know it. We are not meant to do this alone.